Okay.
Okay, as I mentioned on the email, we're dedicating this tonight's class to Rebecca's mother, whose yahrzeit is tonight. That is Peril Bas Feifel. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Shmil Neshama. And we've got a doubleheader parsha this week, Acharei and Kedoshim. And I'd like to take a look optimally at the very beginnings of each, and see if we can put together a little bit even of a connection, of a theme we can hopefully do something with. Starting with Acharei, that's the first of the parshas. This just focus on for just a few moments. A very perplexing opening to the parsha. The first pasuk, first verse. So we are Leviticus 16. If you got a Chumash in hand, if you don't need it, it won't be a problem without the text. So listen to the first verse. And God said to Moshe, after the deaths of the two sons of Aaron, when they came close to God, and they died. So God said to Moshe, what? Next verse, next pasuk, we would expect, okay, here's what Hashem told him. It says the next pasuk, and Hashem said to Moshe, well, wait a minute. If you don't need another and Hashem said to Moshe, the first pasuk said, and God spoke to Moshe at this juncture, and Hashem said to Moshe is a new verb. So the Acharei HaKadosh points out that there's something missing over here, it seems, in terms of what was the dialogue, what was communicated in that first verse. He asks another question. It tells us he spoke to Moshe after the deaths of the two sons of Aaron when they died. Well, that's also seeming really redundant. If it's after the death, then they died. He asks another question. The pasuk says this verse is telling us when they came close to God. It doesn't make any reference to any wrongdoing. We know that earlier on we've come across the story of their death back on that first day of the celebration of the Mishkan, and there was something there called Eish Zara, some type of wrong fire, and commentaries grapple with exactly what it was. And in fact, if you have the Chumash that has the Aramaic translation of Onkelos, right here you'll see that he says they came close. He adds the words with a wrong fire, but the text doesn't say that. So either tell us what they did wrong, or just tell us that they died. But what do we gain by saying when they came close? So again, question number one, what's being communicated here? Question number two, why reiterate the deaths? Question number three, if you're not telling me why they died, what's the message in their coming close? He has more questions as well. I'm going to just make reference to these and try to pull together a quick perspective on a theme that he shares. God said to Moshe, if God says to Moshe, and we don't find any further message, it must be that Moshe is understanding a message in just God's highlighting this fact, and the fact that there's some connection to the death of the sons of Aaron tied to the idea of their closeness. There's something about their closeness and their death that there's some message for me, Moshe, and hearing that God is simply drawing attention to that without communicating any rules, any guidelines, any expectations. He's just highlighting this. And then we go on with the show of him telling Aaron all of the process for entry into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur, the offerings of Yom Kippur, and how he's able to come close to God with the offering of the incense. And he says something fascinating. Moshe is about to tell Aaron how to come to the holiest place on earth. Can Moshe go to that holiest place on earth? Can Moshe do what Aaron can do? See Rabbi Alta shaking his head, no. Keep away, Moshe. Fascinatingly, he brings some discussion as to if there is any debate on this topic, but he takes the approach that what the verse here is telling us is that Hashem was warning Moshe, those who approached me before, and those who were great candidates to approach me, they're called people who are coming close. They're called people whose breach, whatever this failure was, whatever went wrong over there, it's not called some type of trespassing. It's not called some type of, what in the world are you doing over here? You don't belong over here. There was some degree to which they belong here. Something went wrong, and that's for a Parsha Shmini class. What went wrong? Something went wrong. There was some error on their part, but they were called coming close. Anybody remember when Moshe is talking to Aaron after their deaths? Moshe makes reference to something that also uses this word of close. Here it says, B'karva someone, they came close. Like karov is your relative, kiruv, bringing close. Anybody recall Moshe making reference to something about the word karov?
B'krovaya Kadesh.
Perfect. B'krovaya Kadesh. Moshe told Aaron that I expected there's something here called a sanctification with those who are close to me. And the Orach Chaim says, that verse that Dr. Horowitz just referenced, if God calls somebody krovai, they are my close ones, we can expect that means they're my closest ones. And what we find Rashi making reference over there that Moshe was saying, I don't know if it was them or me and you that were going to die in this experience, and we find that they were considering themselves replacements for Moshe and Aaron. It seems that wasn't so far off. There was something about their closeness that was really, really a legitimate closeness with Hashem. We don't know much about Nadav and Avihu, not a lot of storyline about Nadav and Avihu, but they could be called my closest ones. And God is telling Moshe, my closest ones couldn't come this close. Who is the next person in the world who might consider himself to be the closest one? Look, Moshe spent 40 days and 40 nights times 3 in proximity to God on Mount Sinai, whatever that means, in the closest proximity in the heavens of relating to God. He can talk to God face to face. He's the only prophet in all of history who can be a mouthpiece for God directly rather than any type of filtration. And Moshe could expect, okay, Aaron, I'm giving you these criteria how to go into the holiest places. I either can do the same or I might not even need that. I'm one with God. We're really tight. And God is telling him here, without even communicating a message, remember, those who came close crossed the line and they died. And I'm giving instructions for Aaron and not for you. And it doesn't matter that you are close. You can feel very close, you can be very close, but there's some factor that says this is off limits, which is rather stunning if you think about it, because that means, again, taking this approach, and it's not necessarily universal that Moshe could not enter the Holy of Holies, but if he could not, there's a place on earth that Aaron can go, and Moshe cannot. And it's due to something about the holiness, the specialness of the place. I'm not going to get involved in trying to evaluate what it means, the particular holiness of Aaron and Moshe, but a fundamental element in Judaism is that it's not simply in terms of what I feel. It's not even in terms of my excellence. It's very regimented. And you may be the most excellent when it comes to prophecy. And you may be able to do things that no other human being will ever do. But if there is a boundary that requires a certain criteria, and that criteria is to be Aaron HaKohen and you are not, you can't enter. And the whole idea that you may feel very tight, you may feel the relationships very close, but there's a certain intimacy with God that Aaron can have that you can't have. So, keeping this in mind, this whole idea that there's a sense of relationship that's governed by different factors, and one of them is going to be certain boundaries of holiness that only sometimes can one enter and sometimes not. Let's kind of keep that in mind and look at the beginning of Kedoshim and try to analyze what this word holy means. At the beginning of Kedoshim, and I can't tell you I have all this in terms of a final analysis of this. It's a lot of this breaking has to be developed. But the beginning of Kedoshim, which is the beginning of chapter 19. Beginning of chapter 19, God commands Moshe to tell, this time there is a message, tell the entire nation of Israel, Kedoshim Tihiyu. You shall be holy. Why should we be holy? Ki kadosh ani Hashem Elokeichem, I Hashem your God am holy. So you hear this message from Hashem. God says to you, be holy. Okay, now what? What do you do? What did he just tell you? That before he said this, you didn't yet know? And now that he told this to you, okay, now I'm going to do what? So anybody, what are your thoughts? First thing that comes to mind, be holy. It's a tough one. So
if I just tell you Rash and the Ramban, you're going to be, that's not the point of this question, right?
Yes, so Rael's making reference to some of the classics on the page in terms of whether it's avoiding certain, putting boundaries as far as sexual promiscuity and creating a sense of modesty in that realm. Ramban, maybe I'll make reference to in a moment, but it's fascinating. We have a term over here that we take for granted. We talk about it all the time, and it's not so easy to translate it, to grasp. So since Rael made reference to Ramban, Nachmanides, let's at least address his approach, and that is that you can take Torah as a checklist and say, okay, I've got 613 mitzvahs, I've got my 248 thou shalt, my 365 thou shalt nots. Take the whole checklist and adhere to every detail and be a bum. Breakfast, I make sure everything is 100% kosher. All 12 donuts that I'm having for breakfast were 100% kosher. And the 6 beers that I washed them down with were perfectly kosher, right? And then my barbecue lunch, where I have like every cut of meat, but every cut of meat, and I have one of each. And you can be a glutton, and okay, glut kosher, 100% degree. I double checked, it has 6 hashgachas on there. And I can go through life, now technically, by Torah law, I could have a harem of wives, right? And I could be living a life which, if I'm not focused on something more elevated than the dry regiment and the details, I could do all the doing and not do the not doing and be a failure of a person, because I'm not meant to go through life as just a physical mass of molecules, you know, and I'm meant to have a relationship. I'm meant to be nourishing my neshama, my soul, my God connect, the spark of Hashem that we all contain. And Ramban talks about this idea, you know, in his own terminology, of having to recognize this notion to live a holy life, that the details that I'm doing are part of a bigger picture of a relationship and a sensitivity, and being mindful of that connection with God, and really where the mitzvahs are supposed to get me, rather than just a dry checklist. I want to look at another idea quickly on this topic of Kedoshim, of the holiness, and that is the following. It's the Acharei HaKadosh, same commentary I was referring to earlier back in the last parsha, dealing with Moshe and that boundary. In a very lengthy piece here, shares, I'll just draw one facet, shares the following. We know that when we do mitzvahs, let's do the positives, 248 positive mitzvahs. Those are elevating ourselves. And they correspond, Chazal understand that the human body is composed of 248 subparts. Don't try to dissect yourself to figure this out. There is an ancient work of an Italian doctor, Rabbi, that Shiva Weinberg's once referenced, that has a whole list. If you read ancient Italian, maybe it'll help you figure it out. But Chazal described the human body, 248 subparts that are nourished by the positive elements of Torah. So we do something positive. You ate matzah on Pesach night. You count the Omer, you blow shofar. Each action that's a positive fulfillment is elevating. What about when we don't violate a thou shalt not? So all of us currently connected over here are, thank God, not right now killing or stealing. Thank God, not speaking Lashon Hara, not eating any lobsters. When we don't fail, is that elevating, or is it simply not falling? You know, in the physical parallel, if I go to the edge of my balcony and I don't walk off, I'm not elevating myself. I'm just not falling. So how about when it comes to are the whole 365 thou shalt nots, and we don't fail. So one could have thought, okay, so you always remain neutral, you just didn't fall. Says the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, when God says be holy, he's telling us, you, Adas B'nai Yisrael, specifically as a nation of Israel, you're not just living by societal law. You're not even living by Noahide law. You're living by Torah. So if you face a temptation, it's Yom Kippur morning, and I'm on my way to shul, and my next door neighbor has a phenomenal waffle station going on their back patio. Actually, they better not. They're both Orthodox Jews on both sides of me. Whatever. They're a few doors down, and this waffle station, and he said, Rabbi Preis, I made sure to get perfectly kosher ingredients, and look what I got going over here. And I'm, for the moment, tempted, and I say, sorry, no can do. Or let's say it's not Yom Kippur morning. Let's say it's on the way back to Ne'ilah, right? A little more hungry, right? And he's got that waffle station going. And I say, sorry, no can do. Says the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, God did us an incredible favor. By saying Kedoshim to you, you shall be holy. He's saying intrinsically in your relationship with me, everything that you do, whether in the active doing or in the holding back from failure, I'm giving all of that a positive energy of holiness. Because when you avoid, that's also Kedoshim to you, because you are opting to maintain your relationship with me. If you understand the Kedoshim, really in all of the approaches over here, certainly in the Ramban of, it's not a dry checklist, but a relationship with Hashem, I understand that I am more than just a physical body going through life, and I'm an element of that neshama. And in this latter approach of the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, when I understand there's something very big here, each moment of life, God gives us by the breadth of the mitzvahs, all those opportunities, and each moment of life I have an opportunity of elevation, either through the positive fulfillment or the avoidance of the negative. That's all in the Kedoshim Tihiyu. So there are all those more facets of growth. Each of us, in a sense, by working with the exact guidelines and parameters of the context of our life and where God is saying, do this, not do that. That's how we generate the Kedusha. So for an Aaron, going into the Holy of Holies in Yom Kippur, for him is the greatest Kadosh experience. For Moshe, that might be the greatest violation. And I was just thinking this tonight. Generally, for all of us, it's now about 9:30 at night. Half of us would be right now trying to figure out either which minyan we wanted to go to for Mariv or which minyan we're going to go for Mariv. And that would be our holiness. And tonight, through these crazy circumstances, our holiness is in avoiding doing that. In opting to pray, if you didn't do it yet, reminder to pray and count the Omer tonight, but opting to do that as an individual rather than as community, that's our current holiness. Because, the mitzvah of the moment demands the both self-preservation, not getting other people ill, and Kedoshim, Kedusha, therefore, it's not a cookie cutter or one size fits all, and it's not even one stage of life fits all. It's going to be very dependent on context and each moment. And in that moment, holding back from what I should not do because a relationship with God that says don't do that. Opting to do what I should do because of a relationship with God. And again, not as dry checklist and okay, I've got to eat some matzah and I've got to blow a shofar, but nurturing that relationship with Hashem develops a kedusha, develops a kedoshim. And again, to me, it's rather stunning that no matter how much you grow, it's never going to stay that, okay, now I achieved. And for me, it's going to be all 613. None of us can do all 613 mitzvahs by definition. Some are to a king, of a king, to a man, of a woman, Kohen, non-Kohen. And a Moshe and an Aaron. A Moshe can achieve his incredible closeness, and his kedusha is we manifest in a way different than Aaron's kedusha. And hopefully, as we look into these parshas, which unfortunately we'll be probably reading to ourselves this Shabbos rather than communally, we should be reminded that it's a never-ending, ongoing capacity for greater and greater kedusha, greater and greater growth. And thank you, Rabbi Alt, for helping us tonight. I wish everybody a sanctified and pleasant Shabbos.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Shabbos. Shabbos.